Today we are talking about Great Britain, known for its vast green plains, colossal cliffs, and never-ending rain, has always been in constant interaction with continental Europe due to its geographical location. This island, throughout its history, also houses one of the world's most influential kingdoms, England. Yes, today we will discuss how England came to be. To begin this journey, we need to go back 78 years to the date when Julius Caesar set foot on the island. The earliest written records about Britain began to emerge with the invasion of the island by Gaius Julius Caesar in 55 BC. During this invasion period, the people of Britain, who shared a culture similar to the Celt tribes that Caesar fought in Gaul, lived on the island. Like many other nations, they were also referred to as barbarians by the Romans. While Caesar managed to achieve some success during his 2 expeditions to the island, he couldn't establish a permanent Roman dominion. What Caesar couldn't accomplish, Emperor Claudius, who acted in the 40s AD, succeeded in with the campaigns initiated during his reign. The Romans managed to establish a lasting administration in Britain, and the island quickly became one of Rome's provinces. Although the imperial forces that conquered the island occasionally encountered fierce resistance, they managed to capture a significant portion of the island. After the general stages of Britain's conquest by Rome were completed, many Britons who accepted the new rule began to live in peace with the Romans. In this way, a new Britain-Roman culture emerged. As part of the empire, the Britons, like many other subjects, converted to Christianity as it spread. The maturation of this process, both in the other provinces of the empire and in Britain, reached around the mid-4th century, around the 350s AD. However, this era of peace and Christianization would not be long-lasting. There was a significant problem at hand. The empire was under attack on many fronts. Especially the lands in Western Europe were constantly under the invasion and plunder of Germanic tribes. Rome was already in the process of fragmentation, and pursuing its old conquest policy had become impossible. In fact, the empire's borders had expanded so much even during this period that the idea of withdrawing from some of the more distant regions of the empire had started to be considered. As part of this withdrawal plan, Rome gradually began to abandon Britain starting in the late 4th century, around the 370s. By the year 410, the number of Roman troops on the island had dwindled to a few hundred. This collapse brought about a significant transformation for the peoples living in Britain. Within a few centuries, the gradually evolving Britain-Roman culture, which later became Christianized, quickly became more isolated and obscure, detaching itself from mainland Europe. Although the Britons remained Christian in many respects, they had reverted to their pre-Roman ways. This process of regression turned British history into a dark and uncertain abyss. Understanding the reason behind this is not too difficult. The Britons did not have the habit of keeping historical records like the Romans, so not much has survived from this period to the present day. What we know about the era is primarily from later written sources. Among these records, the writings of Gildas, known as the De Excidio et Conquestu Britannia, or On the Ruin and Conquest of Britain, and the work of a monastery monk named Bede, titled Historia Ecclesiastica Gentis Anglo-Rum, or Ecclesiastical History of the English People, stand out. However, it should be noted that the scarcity of records from this period does not pose a significant obstacle to the study of the era's history. Yes, many things may remain unknown to us, but what we do know will generally suffice for us to understand the situation. For instance, after the Romans departed, We know that various tribes organized themselves into settlements and divided the land among them. It was precisely during this period that a significant event took place that fundamentally changed the cultural makeup of the island. The Angles, Saxons, and Jutes, originally hailing from the north of Germany, collectively began launching expeditions to the British Isles. These expeditions gained serious momentum, especially from the year 449 onwards. Today, there are different theories regarding the reasons for these expeditions. Some historians suggest that these Anglo-Saxon tribes left continental Europe due to famine, while others claim that certain British tribes and leaders specifically invited them to the island and wanted to use them as a military force against rival leaders. According to the second theory, the Anglo-Saxons initially came to the island to assist a particular British tribe in warfare. But when they realized their own strength, they decided to conquer the island. Considering the fragile state of the British Isles at the time, and the periodic troubles in Europe, both of these theories can be valid. No matter which theory one accepts, it's not easy to say that the general outcome changed. This is because the Anglo-Saxons, who embarked on a campaign against them, quickly seized a significant portion of the island. The Britons had no choice but to flee from the Saxons and settle in what is now known as Wales in order to preserve their own culture. The Jutes, who arrived as a minority, settled in the Kent region and the Isle of Wight. The Saxons settled in the southern part of the island and established the kingdoms of Essex, Sussex, and Wessex. The Angles conquered the central and northern regions of the island and established the kingdoms of Mercia and Northumbria. The transition from Roman culture to Anglo-Saxon culture not only had significant historical implications but also led to a change in the name of the island. While the name Britain continued to be used for the entire island, the southern and central parts of the island, which had close contact with continental Europe, began to be referred to as Angeland, the land of the Angles. Eventually, Hingeland evolved into England. So, how did the Anglo-Saxon order become established and replace the old order in reality? Especially for the early years, there was no clear system in place. Most of the established kingdoms were not founded in a planned and systematic manner, but were established as a result of the general circumstances. It was a matter of who took control of which territory and made it their home. The reason for this was the warrior nature of the tribes that began arriving on the island from around 50 AD. The leaders of the incoming Anglo-Saxon tribes, once they gained superiority over the Britons, realized that there was plenty of unoccupied land to settle on the island. To gain control of these lands, they had to compete with each other, but continuing this competition was not possible without finding allies and soldiers to support them. The payments made to win their loyalty were funded from the spoils of war. Financially, this situation was quite challenging and could not be a long-term solution. After all, the spoils could be easily spent over time. They found a solution to this problem through another issue that came their way. As the boundaries of the conquered territories expanded, it became increasingly difficult for tribal leaders to control the captured lands on their own. Dividing these unclaimed lands among their own people could make governing easier. They began to provide their supporters with land for farming and livestock rather than just giving them spoils. Different families became landowners based on their closeness to tribal leaders and the support they provided in battle. This land distribution system that emerged started to require organized management. As a result, tribal leaders who rewarded their supporters with land transformed them into lords and barons. The complex era that emerged after the Anglo-Saxon invasion seemed to have come to an end, In this form, the island began to attract the attention of Europe. Pope Gregory was among those interested in this new order. In 595, he sent a priest named Saint Augustine to Britain. Augustine's mission was to invite the people of the island to Christianity. The Pope not only provided the necessary financial support for this mission, but also sent the best monks of the Roman Catholic Church to the island. However, Augustine initially struggled to fulfill this mission. The aggressive attitude of the people and rulers towards Christianity eventually wore him down, and he returned to Rome. However, the Pope was not ready to give up on the island so easily and convinced him to return. In this second attempt, Augustine's efforts began to bear fruit, and Ethelbert, the King of Kent, one of the leading regions of the island, accepted Christianity. The process of religious change, initiated by Ethelbert's conversion, resulted in the conversion of all other Anglo-Saxon kingdoms to Christianity. Within the next 100 years, this process of Christianization had a positive impact on the island. As mentioned earlier, Anglo-Saxon kings and their subjects were generally pagans, who believed in the concept of gaining true honor through warfare and saw forgiving their rivals as a sign of weakness. Additionally, their belief in different gods often led to frequent conflicts. However, after converting to Christianity, the idea of uniting around a common faith became much more acceptable to them. The next step was the emergence of the idea of establishing a united kingdom, a single England with a single king. Indeed, this idea began to gain influence rapidly. From the early 7th century onwards, a significant process began on the island, with the kingdom of Mercia standing out. The Mercian kings had gained power over a significant portion of the region, south of the River Humber. Some of these kings are mentioned in sources as Rex Britannia, meaning the King of Britain. Many local Anglo-Saxon administrations on the island, especially those south of the River Great Ouse, came together under the control of these kings. Norse kings, although not entirely, had some influence over the local administrations and kingdoms in the region. Each local administration had its own king, who operated under the authority and protection of the Norse kings. However, this period of unity that began in Mercia did not last long. England entered a new phase with the arrival of invaders from the Scandinavian region. The period that historians refer to as the Viking Age had now begun. It was recorded that raiders were first seen in the Set Valley around the year 789. In 793, a monastery was plundered. Over the next 70 years, the situation became even more dire for all of England, as the Vikings were now coming to the island not just to raid, but to settle. The kingdoms had failed to establish an effective unity among themselves and were scattered throughout the island. They were constantly subjected to Viking raids. What was at risk was not just their lands and wealth, but also their beliefs that were closely associated with their culture. What was once inhabited by Britons was now being occupied by the Anglo-Saxons. Despite all of this, there was a kingdom in the heartland of the island that managed to maintain its internal unity and survive. This kingdom was ruled by the Kingdom of Wessex and was a sixth kingdom in these difficult times. The efforts of its leadership were not in vain. His brother, Alfred, stood by him with his brilliant ideas, genius, and courage. Yes, our current topic is how the Kingdom of England was established. When discussing this topic, the person we should focus on the most is King Alfred. Before talking about what kind of King Alfred was, it is important to mention why he can be considered the founder of the Kingdom of England, and why many people view him this way. First of all, it should be noted that Alfred himself did not wear the crown as the King of England. He was the King of Wessex, and considered himself the king of the Anglo-Saxons. The person considered the first king of England is Aethelstan, who was Alfred's grandson. However, it is clear that Alfred was the architect of Aethelstan's path to the throne. Throughout all of Anglo-Saxon history, Alfred was perhaps the most serious proponent of the idea of a single kingdom, and the one who made plans for it to happen, showed those around him how these plans could be implemented, and took concrete steps in this regard. Now it's time to open the pages of his story. In 871, after the death of his brother Ethelred, he was declared king by the unity of the kingdom. And when he inherited the throne of Wessex, all of England was in great turmoil and crisis. The Vikings had captured many places in the eastern and northeastern regions of the island. They had even established their own bases and settlements in these areas, which they used to raid Anglo-Saxon villages. This was the biggest problem for England at the time. All the kingdoms were trying to resist the raiders and stay afloat. Despair and hopelessness had taken hold of most people's minds. Perhaps many thought that England's complete takeover by Viking invaders was inevitable. However, Alfred had a unique quality that set him apart. He could stay calm and make plans in situations where others succumbed to despair. Moreover, he was quite skilled at turning some of the problems that others saw into opportunities. Alfred believed that there was only one thing that could solve all of England's problems, bringing together all the people of the island under a single kingdom instead of the fragmented kingdoms. This kingdom would unite all the kingdoms on the island, not just the lands south of the River Thames as in the Mercian period, under a single rule, without another king in between. This kingdom would have a structure that all Anglo-Saxon people would respect and adapt to, and it would provide a government where the newly settled Scandinavian invaders could live in peace and harmony with the local people. Alfred's idea of a unified kingdom, especially one that included the Vikings, was quite unconventional because the kings before him believed in fighting the Vikings to the bitter end. In contrast, Alfred argued that such a war would only further deplete the already exhausted Anglo-Saxon people and warriors in the planned new kingdom. It had become imperative to make room for the Vikings, who had become a reality on the island. How could he convince these ruthless Scandinavian warriors, who had a reputation for brutality, that his peace-focused plan would work, as mentioned earlier? Alfred was quite skilled at identifying and capitalizing on opportunities that others couldn't see. He was aware that the Vikings had come to the island in search of wealth and suitable lands for agriculture. He believed that once a significant number of Vikings had acquired enough wealth and land, they would lose their appetite for war. To put this idea into practice, he developed a system called Danegeld and the Danegeld system. The word Danegeld referred to the tribute paid to Viking warriors, primarily from Denmark, who made up the majority of the Viking raiders. The word means money in Old English. The Young King's Danegeld system worked as follows. When Viking raiders entered the boundaries of the Kingdom of Wessex, the king and other leaders, with their gathered forces, intercepted the raiding group. Instead of immediately engaging in battle, they offered them money. This offer made sense to many Viking warriors because, after all, they had been defeated by Alfred's leadership in the past. However, there were some problems with the Danegeld system. Some Vikings, despite taking the money, continued to raid and attack Saxon forces. Nevertheless, it can be said that the system, in general, was successful. It prevented the Saxon forces from continuously engaging in wars and depleting their resources. Moreover, it showed that it was possible to establish a peaceful environment among peoples who had been hostile to each other based on common interests. Alfred began his reign with innovative and effective steps. but some Vikings who continued to accept Danegeld payments and engage in raids remained a significant problem, a group of them. In January 878 launched a sudden raid on Alfred's stronghold. Some of Alfred's warriors lost their lives in this attack, and others scattered to different parts of the island. Alfred fled to the marshes in Somerset, and rumors quickly spread throughout the country that he had died. At this point, it's not hard to understand just how hopeless the overall situation appeared to be. Alfred's remarkable resilience and leadership allowed him to turn the tide of the Viking invasions. His victory over the Viking forces at the Battle of Edington in 878 was a turning point. Instead of seeking revenge and retribution, Alfred chose a different path. He made peace with the Viking leader Guthrum and his supporters, which led to Guthrum's conversion to Christianity, along with some of his followers. This act of reconciliation showed Alfred's diplomatic skills and his commitment to bringing stability to the region. In the years between 878 and 886, Alfred continued his struggle against Vikings who were reluctant to embrace peace. In 886, he captured London, one of the most important cities on the island, which was a significant achievement. With the support of his son Edward and Mercia's prince Ethelred, he achieved numerous victories over the Vikings. Alfred's strategy of accommodating peaceful Viking settlers and focusing on defensive warfare while allowing those Vikings who wished to live in peace was successful. The Anglo-Saxons, previously thought to be at the brink of defeat, gradually reclaimed English territories. When Alfred passed away in 899, his legacy lived on through his son Edward, who continued his father's efforts. Alfred's daughter, Ethelflaed, was married to Prince Ethelred of Mercia, further solidifying the alliance between the Anglo-Saxons and Mercia. This period marked a significant step toward the unification of England as a single kingdom. Ethelred's death and Ethelflaed's assumption of leadership in Mercia led to a significant consolidation of power in the region. With Ethelflaed and Edward joining forces, Mercia and Wessex effectively merged. The two siblings continued their efforts to reclaim their territories and resist the invading Vikings. Ethelflaed's death in 921 marked the beginning of a new era. Edward became the sole ruler of the combined Mercia and Wessex kingdoms when he passed away in 925. His son Aethelstan was crowned as the king of a united England, a level of territorial control unprecedented in the island's history. With Aethelstan being crowned as the king of all English and Saxons, the foundational stage of the English kingdom was complete. Alfred's dream had become a reality. However, this was just the beginning of the English adventure as the journey of the English people continued to unfold.